Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into a moonless stretch of mythic forest, where a single boulder rests on a mossy legend. It's humming, you don't know how long you've been walking, or even what you're looking for. Maybe peace. Maybe a memory. Maybe just a spot with better acoustics. But right now, your hands are busy tuning the strings of your lyre, each note trembling out into the quiet like a sigh. A soft breeze plays with your hair, and the stone beneath you is unusually warm. Also, it's snoring. Yes, the rock is snoring. But you're trying not to panic about that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pluck another gentle chord, trying not to draw attention to the fact that the boulder beneath you appears to be dreaming. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just settling. Rocks probably do that, settle, like old men in baths. You shift slightly, adjusting your posture, your fingers fluttering over the strings again. The forest around you is still, not ominously still, just lazy, half listening, like a cat halfway through a nap. Somewhere in the distance, a cicada gives up mid-buzz. This particular ledge flat, smooth flecked with quartz, sits just high enough above the ravine that it catches the last echo of every note. The acoustics are perfect. Too perfect. Suspiciously perfect. You're starting to get the sense that this was once a stage, or maybe an altar. Or maybe one of those natural amphitheaters gods use when they want to be dramatic. You glance down at the lyre. A 7-stringed beauty carved from cedar wood, its frame slightly warped from travel. It's older than it should be. You're not entirely sure it didn't sprout out of your spine one morning after a dream about fish. There's a tiny etching of a goat on the back, which you've never been able to explain. You hum softly, just a test note, and the boulder emits a contented little in harmony. Okay, so yes, it's absolutely snoring in tune, but you're Orpheus, son of a muse, bard of Thrace, guy who tried to serenade the god of death and almost got away with it. You've handled worse than a sentient rock. You keep playing, because what else is there to do? Every time you stop, silence presses too close, like wet wool on your skin. And silence, for you, is dangerous. Silence makes room for memory, especially that one, the one of her laughing on a hill, one sandal missing, hair full of wind, the way she called you ridiculous, then asked you to sing it again, the way the ground opened, the scream, the fact that you looked back. That single moment of doubt, of desperation, that cost you everything. Historians still argue whether you were tricked or just human, whether Hades set a trap, or whether trust was the real test all along. You don't know. You only remember her hand slipping from yours, the way morning light hits a leaf before it drops. You play softer now. The lullaby isn't one you wrote. It sort of happened, like dew or guilt. You've been singing it to everything that won't run away. Trees, lakes, moths, but the rock. The rock listens. A mainstream scholarly fact. Ancient Greek lyres were often tuned to modes we no longer fully understand. The Dorian mode survives, but others like Mixolydian or Phrygian carry emotional colors we've lost. Your lullaby seems to slide between them, refusing to settle. just like you. The rock sighs under you. You glance back. No eyes, no mouth, no carvings or runes. Just stone, unbothered. Present. You're starting to think it might be the ideal audience, except something is shifting in its texture. Subtle, but there. As you play, faint striations appear on its surface rings, like those in tree trunks, or sedimentary lines in canyon walls. You don't stop playing. The last time you interrupted mid-lullaby, a squirrel bit you, twice. The rock's rings pulse faintly. It's not waking, it's remembering. You're somehow playing it back to itself. You lean in slightly. The strings of your lyre hum beneath your fingers, and suddenly you're aware that the tone of your song is shifting, darker, slower. Not sad, but ancient. There's a weight to the melody now, as if it were pressing up through millennia. Somewhere in your memory, you recall an obscure scroll from Alexandria that claimed certain rocks, under the right vibration, could recount their origin stories, that they could, if lulled properly, whisper the tectonic lullabies of Pangaea's breakup. A fringe idea. Scholars called it nonsense. But those scholars never sat on a snoring stone in a myth forest with an emotional support. Lyre, a breeze picks up. The leaves above you rustle with the sound of applause. Not literal clapping, just the sleepy shush-shush of branches impressed. You smirk, a little applause never hurt, and still you play. Your fingers ache slightly, but it's a good ache, like holding hands too long. The rock murmurs again, and this time, you hear a word. Not a Greek word, not anything human. More of a tone, a seismic vowel, like a lullaby echoing from a world before names. You don't respond, you just keep playing, your eyes half closed. The stars above tilt slightly, curious thought, because tonight, your audience is a stone. And for the first time in a long while, it's enough. You pause your playing just long enough to shift your weight. The boulder, clearly annoyed, lets out a tiny tectonic harumph, and goes quiet again. A small patch of moss near your left elbow shrivels up, as if to say, rude. You whisper a half apology to the moss, and resume plucking, though your mind has already wandered to her again. Funny. The things you remember most clearly. Not the dramatic stuff. Not the descent into the underworld, or the crowd of spirits watching your every step. No, what floats back first is Eurydice's third favorite sandal. The one with the bronze leafwork across the strap, and that completely unnecessary heel that made her walk like she was always 5 seconds from falling over. You used to tease her about it. She claimed it added dramatic flair to otherwise forgettable days. You'd ask what happened to sandals 1 and 2. She said one got eaten by a goat, and the other eloped with a merchant's daughter. You believed her, you always did. She had a way of talking like her words were already music. The strings hum under your fingers. They always do when you think about her too long. Your surroundings have shifted slightly. You're no longer alone with the boulder. The clearing has gained a certain hazy shape, a memory-like blur around the edges. It feels like a theater mid-dream. And there down the slope a cave yawns open like a forgotten mouth, its edges soft with ivy and regret. You've passed it before, of course. Every wandering bard does. Some call it the cave that Echo forgot. Others claim it leads nowhere. Some say it's where Zeus hides when he gets tired of God committee meetings. You're not entirely sure you didn't leave your second best cloak in there last summer. Historians still argue whether that cave was ever a formal oracle site. Some think it once housed a minor earth deity, Patrea, maybe the goddess of geological coincidence. No one worships her now, but she might still be watching, waiting to see if you trip. You consider investigating the cave, but the boulder gives a soft thrum beneath you. A gentle reminder. You've got a concert to finish, so, instead, you start playing again, but you change the tune, just slightly. You weave in a rhythm that mimics Eurydice's footsteps in those ridiculous sandals click, pause, click, sway. Your fingers follow the dance you still see when you close your eyes too long. And then, you hear it clapping, slow. Not entirely sarcastic, but not what you'd call enthusiastic either. You glance up. A satyr stands across the clearing, arms folded, chewing what appears to be a celery stalk he's borrowed without asking. He raises one fuzzy eyebrow. Well, he says, you certainly know how to serenade a rock. You blink. Do I know you? He shrugs. No, but I'm late for a union meeting, and your chord progression was surprisingly tolerable. You consider being offended, but he's already rustling in his bag for something. A scroll, a half-burnt snack, a pint. He's not very organized. Turns out the satyrs are on strike. Again, something about hooves not being recognized as performance instruments and a lack of proper hay. Breaks during Bacchic festivals. Mainstream fact. In many early Greek theatrical rituals, satyrs played a crucial comedic role, often interrupting tragedies with body dances and flute solos. You suspect this one would have excelled at throwing off your tempo. You ask if he wants to join you. He declines something about rhythm-induced migraines, but he does say, your lullaby has potential. Little less heartbreak, little more slumber, he says, tapping his horns like they're tuning forks, as he disappears into the undergrowth. Muttering about bylaws and questionable choreography. The boulder beneath you lets out another long, resonant breath. You smile. Despite everything, you feel, oddly grounded. Then a fig tree nearby clears its throat. You look up, slowly. Yes, it's definitely the tree. Just saying, it mutters. Your middle section drags. You're leaning too much on emotional nostalgia. Maybe throw in a talking animal next time. You blink. You're a tree. MMHM. And you're a man singing to a rock. Let's not get judgy. You consider arguing, but the tree has a point. You've been playing it safe. Staying inside your sorrow like it's a cozy bathrobe. Maybe it's time to stretch a little. You let the next note hang longer. Let it crackle, let it ache. A fringe theory you remember from some old scholar in Delis drunk off honey wine and melon slices was that Orphic music didn't just move men or gods, but tectonic plates, that your ancestors could soothe earthquakes, not stop them, make them, change their minds. You never believed that, until the boulder sighed again. Suddenly the cave seems darker, deeper. You feel it watching you, like it's waiting for your next mistake. But you don't stop playing, you adjust the tempo. Layer in the rhythm of sandal steps, the flick of fig leaves, the plodding complaints of Enoanized satyrs, and the deep, slow heartbeat of stone. It's a lullaby, yes, but not for sleeping. It's for remembering your fingers slow, just enough to let the last chord drift off into the forest's hush. The boulder hums faintly beneath you, as if pleased but not quite impressed. Fine, you've had tougher audiences. There was that time in Thessaly when you tried to calm a herd of stampeding goats with a waltz. They trampled your dinner, but two of them cried, so it wasn't a total failure. You exhale through your nose, adjust your grip, and think, something's off about the tempo. Or maybe the melody needs more vulnerability. But then again, you've been extremely vulnerable lately. Like borderline embarrassing. Maybe you need to try something new. So you get up, stretch your back, your knees pop like old floorboards. The boulder groans faintly, its surface cooling slightly now that you've stepped off. You pat it gently. "I'll be back," you whisper. "Don't roll away." It does not respond, which feels fair. You wander a few paces into the underbrush, twigs snapping under your sandals, and pause beneath a tree that smells strongly of licorice and unspoken judgment. You pull a fig from a low branch, ripe, purple. Smug, you take a bite. It tastes like potential failure, with a hint of honey. You need a new audience, just to test the lullaby. Someone, or something that isn't emotionally entangled with your tragic rock saga. As if on cue, a faint rustle to your left. And then the unmistakable tinkle of panpipes being dropped. You step into a small clearing to find a group of satyrs clustered around a tree stump, clearly in the middle of a union meeting. One has a clipboard. One is eating a scroll. Another is writing an impassioned haiku with goat hoof calligraphy. You strum a lazy chord as you enter, which earns you a collective groan. "Not now, Orpheus," one says, not looking up. "We're deep in negotiations." "Over what?" you ask, genuinely curious. "Breaks," the clipboard satyr says. "Specifically, whether bacchanals count as overtime or just unregulated revelry." You nod solemnly. "Important distinction." They don't laugh. "Tough crowd," you strum again, and this time let your voice join in low, soft, persuasive. It's not the full lullaby, just a sketch. A whisper of the thing. You hum the part that mimics a stream. Curling around stones, a note that feels like sunset slipping behind hills. One satyr slowly lowers his haiku. Another blinks and starts chewing it instead. The one with the clipboard taps a pen against his horn. "Okay," he admits. "That part about time being a hammock, that was decent." You keep going. Add a fluttering motif, something borrowed from Eurydice's old habit of whistling to bees. You watch their ears flick and eyes glaze, their goat legs wobble slightly. One collapses in a graceful spiral onto a patch of moss. You're not surprised. You've always known that music, when played from somewhere between grief and memory, can blur reality. Mainstream fact. Ancient Greeks genuinely believed in music's power to heal the soul and sway emotions. Entire treatises were written on how different modes could trigger sadness, joy, courage, even sleep. You're currently aiming for drowsy, but thoughtful. The lullaby winds down gently, and the last note hangs, suspended in the heavy summer air like a thread of golden honey. The satyrs blink. Look around. Did I nap standing up? One mutters, another shrugs. I think my hooves dissolved for a second. They all turn toward you. The clipboard satyr folds his arms. All right. Consider that an audition. You can come to the next meeting, but bring snacks. You bow. Anything but olives. I'm still banned from Delphi for what happened last time. One satyr snorts. You shouldn't have sung the pickling song in E major. Fair? You'd overreached, as they shuffle back into the forest, possibly to draft new bylaws about dream music. You wander slowly back to the ledge. The boulder waits. Stoic, maybe a little smug. You sit again, and it immediately warms beneath you. A tiny shiver runs up your spine, not unpleasant. Okay, you murmur, fingers finding the strings again. Version 3. Less melancholy, more moss appreciation. You start slow, build the lullaby again, adding in what you learned from the satyrs. You blend the rhythm of union complaints with the dreamy tone of a goat haiku. It's working. The rock vibrates gently under you, like a cat purring in geologic language. Fringe tidbit, there's a whisper of a theater found, scribbled on the edge of a broken urn, that music isn't merely entertainment, but a form of remembering the world's first language. The one that rocks, trees, rivers, and stars spoke before we came along and muddied everything with words. Your lullaby might be scratching at that language's door. The strings hum, the notes stretch and lean into each other, and then your voice catches not from sorrow, but from joy. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the song feels right. Not perfect, not polished, but true. You look out across the trees. They shimmer faintly, like they've been pulled just a little closer to dream. And beneath you, the boulder exhales, a gentle sigh, like a mountain remembering rain. You stay perfectly still for a moment, letting the boulder's sigh settle into your spine. There's a strange kind of comfort in being serenaded by something that has literally seen millennia pass it by, and still thinks you are interesting enough to hum at you. Wiggle your fingers, no numbness, no splinters. Good signs. Last time you reached this stage of musical experimentation, your lyre snapped a string, and a swarm of bees interpreted it as a declaration of war. You're still banned from the Peloponnese, but not here. Not on this ledge. You pluck out a few experimental harmonics, coaxing little chimes from the strings. Then you pause. Something in the air has shifted. You hear it before you see it. A dozen chirping birds, maybe more, high above, weaving through the canopy in tight spirals. But they're not singing, they're mimicking. You squint upward. Sure enough, their chirps aren't random, they're doing your lullaby only backwards. One of them, an overly confident swallow, lands on a branch near your head and belts out your verse in reverse like it's auditioning for a play called Orpheus, the remix. You lower your lyres slowly. No offense, but you've got the melody all wrong. The bird squawks indignantly and flaps off, presumably to file a complaint. Historians still argue whether Orphic music was considered sacred because of its divine origins, or simply because it confused local wildlife enough to be considered mystical. This would have been a perfect case study. The rest of the birds form a synchronized arc above the trees, their tails catching little flecks of dusk light. You try not to read too deeply into it. Birds are notoriously unreliable critics. Still, it's hard not to feel judged. You try playing again, slightly louder, reasserting the melody. This time, the birds flutter back down and land in a semicircle around the clearing like they're ready to hold a post-performance feedback session. That's when you notice the circle of mushrooms at your feet. You didn't see them before. A perfect ring, soft and white, their caps tilted just slightly toward the center. You feel a subtle pull behind your navel, the unmistakable suggestion of magic with opinions. You sigh. Great, We've reached the enchanted forest feedback loop portion of the evening. The birds chirp in sarcastic agreement, so you adjust. You slow the tempo. You lean into the lullaby's quieter phrases, threading in more of the pauses, the breath, the spaces between notes that make the whole thing feel like a conversation with silence. And slowly, it works. The birds settle, a few tilt their heads rhythmically, eyes drooping. One yawns. It's hard not to feel smug. Mainstream fact. The ancient Greek concept of music encompassed not just music but all creative arts inspired by the muses, poetry, dance, even certain sciences. You're pretty sure sleep-inducing bird chorus falls under that umbrella then. Just as you think the moment has peaked, a new sound breaks through. Not from above. From below, a crunch. Then, a shuffle. Something is moving inside the cave. You freeze. The boulder beneath you tenses ever so slightly. You're fairly certain that if it had shoulders, they'd be clenched. A shadow stretches out from the cave's mouth, long, slow, deliberate. You whisper, "Please don't be an underworld inspector." But what emerges isn't a specter or monster. It's a child. Or at least, something shaped like a child. Pale, translucent, trailing ribbons of fog instead of hair. Its eyes are closed, but it walks as if it knows exactly where it's going. It stops in front of you, tilts its head, and says, in a voice like wind over old parchment, "You sang the end of my dream." Backwards you blink eye sorry. It nods solemnly. "It's fine. I forgot how it went anyway." It sits cross-legged in the moss. Doesn't move again. Just waits. The birds go silent. Even the air stills, so you play. You improvise the next verse of the lullaby. Now weaving in strange, echoing intervals, ones you didn't know your lyre could manage. You let the cave's breath shape the pitch. You let the fog child's presence bend the rhythm. You're not sure if you're composing or remembering. And as the lullaby grows, a curious thing happens. The mushrooms tilt toward you. The birds rest their heads under wings. Even the shadows around the clearing seemed to grow soft edges. Fringe theory, some Orphic cults believed rocks and trees were fragments of ancient titans, trapped in the waking world by Prometheus' bargain. That with the right song, you could wake them or lull them back into peaceful dreaming. You decide not to wake anyone tonight. You let the lullaby end, not with a flourish, but with a breath. And the fog child smiles. Just slightly, then fades. Not vanishes, just becomes less important. Like a detail in a fading dream. You sit back against the boulder. It thrums faintly under your spine, like a purr or a distant drumbeat. You whisper, "That was new." No response, just quiet approval. You close your eyes. Maybe just for a moment. You don't actually fall asleep, at least, not the full kind. It's more of a slow surrender, like drifting underwater without holding your breath. The boulder is warm against your back now, humming in tiny, imperceptible frequencies that buzz like the memory of a lullaby someone sang to you before your bones knew language. Then, a small voice near your ankle breaks the silence. "Are you quite sure that was a lullaby?" You crack one eye open. A pebble, particularly large one, is sitting upright, like it owns the place. It's got a smooth surface and an unmistakably judgmental vibe. "Depends," you mumble. "Why? Did it wake you?" "I was having a perfectly good sedimentary dream," the pebble says, sounding like a librarian from an underfunded archive. Now I've got metaphors stuck in my strata. You sit up, stretching slightly. That sounds uncomfortable. The pebble harumphes. You people always assume rocks have no inner life. Just because we don't move doesn't mean we don't feel. Fair point, you say. I've met centaurs who are less emotionally available than you. It bounces once. Whether in agreement or irritation is unclear, and so begins your increasingly odd conversation with a committee of talking pebbles. One by one, they begin to rouse around you, little stone faces emerging in knotholes, cracks, and crevices. Not all talk, but all watch. Some hum faintly. A few blink. One appears to be knitting with lichen. You wonder if you're dreaming. You strum your lyre once, just to check. The boulder sighs in its usual baritone. The knitting pebble gives a polite round of applause. So probably not a dream. Or at least, not a bad one. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Greeks often believed spirits could inhabit objects, especially natural ones, springs, even stones. The idea of petrademonia, or stone spirits, is hinted at in fringe Orphic hymns that never made it into the big festivals. Which brings you to a sudden realization. You're not just singing to a boulder anymore. You're performing for an audience that has quite literally been here longer than the gods. And you haven't even tuned your lyre properly today. You glance down and pluck one note. Sharp, slightly offensive. The pebble near your knee grimaces. Yikes, it says. You clear your throat and get to work adjusting the strings. Carefully, no sudden movements. You're now performing under pressure from several billion years of geological critique. Maybe start with something simple. One of the older pebbles suggests. Nothing that makes us remember continental drift. If you don't mind, that breakup was messy. You settle on an old shepherd's lullaby you once heard in Arcadia, something soft, repetitive, harmless. The kind of tune that makes goats sleep standing up and shepherds accidentally nap in flower beds. As you play, the pebbles sway gently. Well, not sway, exactly, they just kind of vibrate emotionally. Even the moss on the boulder seems to be enjoying itself, fluffing slightly, absorbing the melody like dew. But then something strange happens. You pause between verses, just for a breath, and in that moment of quiet, the boulder sings back, not with words, not even with sound, exactly. It just resonates, the way your chest does when you're near a large drum or standing too close to a temple bell. The lullaby rebounds, folded, altered. You recognize it. It's your song but deeper, older. Like the boulders remembering. A version of the melody from before humans had fingers. You try not to panic. You also try not to cry. Both are awkward in front of geological witnesses. Instead, you lean into it. You repeat the phrase the boulder just gave back to you, letting your voice follow the rhythm of stone and silence. And suddenly, you are the echo. Historians still argue whether Orpheus was ever truly mortal in the way the rest of us are. Some claim he became partially divine through the act of performance itself, that he sang himself into myth, note by note, until even death had to listen. You don't know if you believe that, but sitting here, serenading a pebble council, and being serenaded back by the rock equivalent of an ancient baritone godfather, you can see why they thought it. There's a shift in the air, a cooling. The forest leans inward. One pebble, the one shaped like a tiny potato, clears its throat. Do the one about the stars again. You blink. I never played one about stars. You will, it says, smug, eventually. You narrow your eyes at the pebble. Are you prophesying at me? Maybe it winks, or rotates slightly. Hard to tell, so you play. You try to imagine what a lullaby for a star might sound like. Slow, fast. A melody that drifts between heartbeats. Something Eurydice would have liked. And you realize you're not just playing for stones, or birds, or ghosts anymore. You're playing for everything. You play until your fingers ache, until your spine hums with the vibration of half-remembered melodies and half-invented ones, until even the pebbles stop offering feedback. Not because they've run out of opinions, clearly not, but because they're starting to doze off. One leans against another, murmuring something about tectonic lullabies and that one time we were part of a mountain with feelings. You don't interrupt. The silence that follows your song is thick and meaningful, like honey cooling in a bowl. But then footsteps. You hear them before you see anything, soft, unhurried, crunching through. Leaf litter in that specific way that always means someone's arrived with an agenda and probably a clipboard. You glance up, and there he is. Hermes, no winged sandals today. He's barefoot, his robes unusually casual, like he dressed in a hurry. Or just came from a toga-optional brunch. His hair's wind mussed, his eyes too bright. And he's carrying something that looks suspiciously like a messenger scroll, but might actually be a baguette. Hello, musical catastrophe, he says, with the kind of smirk that makes you instantly regret not being in the middle of a more impressive chord. You nod. Nice of Olympus to finally send someone. He shrugs. I was in the area, dropping off dream schedules. Heard you were out? Here, singing to a boulder again. Not again, you mutter. Still, he squats down beside the boulder and pats it gently. This one, you nod. Good choice, reliable sediment. Strong emotional base. You know this one used to be part of a funerary shrine, right? Back when shrines were still trendy. You didn't know that. The boulder remains silent but radiates a kind of bashful pride, mainstream fact. Hermes, among his many divine job titles, was the god of communication. Travel and messages, including those between the living and the dead. Which makes it extra awkward when he shows up uninvited while you're mid-lullaby breakdown. So, he says, sitting cross-legged now, you've been composing lullabies for inanimate objects. I'm branching out, you reply dryly. Well, the management upstairs is intrigued. There's talk of it being a form of penance, you know, like community service, but more symbolic, of course. You frown. For what, exactly? He grins. You know, looking back, that whole ruining everything incident. The usual. You glance away. That ache is still there, quiet and pulsing under your ribs, like a bruise that's become part of your posture, anyway. Hermes continues, rummaging through a bag that seems to contain everything from scrolls to a half-eaten nectarine. I'm authorized to offer you a task. You raise an eyebrow. Singing to rocks wasn't the task. Nope, that was the warm-up. He pulls out a papyrus scroll with your name on it. You know it's yours because it's written in dramatic swirling calligraphy and slightly singed at the edges. He unrolls it, reads it briefly, and hands it to you. You're to compose a lullaby for a geological entity. Not just any entity, though. You glance down. The scroll reads, in alarming red ink, Assigned subject: the limestone formation of Keros. Category: unremarkable, but emotionally blocked. Objective: illicit. TERSU blink. You want me to make a rock cry? Hermes nod. It's symbolic of what? He shrugs. That's above my pay grade. Fringe theory: some Orphic disciples believed that sorrow, when acknowledged by nature, could open hidden doors in the world, literal or emotional. There were chants designed to weep with the earth, to remind stones they were once stars. Hermes stands, dusts off his hands. Anyway, just thought I'd pop in. You're doing great, by the way. Very haunted forest core. Are you leaving now? He nods. Gotta go deliver a dream about flamingos to an Athenian philosopher who insists dreams don't exist. Should be fun. He taps his foot, and his sandals reappear fully winged. Unnecessarily sparkly, he lifts off like it's nothing, and is gone before you can ask if he wants to hear the new bridge section of your lullaby. Typical. The pebbles stir again, muttering. One rolls its eyes, murmuring something about divine deadlines, another hiccups softly in its sleep. You stare at the scroll in your hands. Crying limestone, that's the task. You glance at the boulder beside you. What do you think? It doesn't respond. But it does seem to scoot half a centimeter closer. That's encouragement enough. You pluck a chord, low, soft, like the feeling just before rain. You hum a note. That could have been Eurydice's breath on the back of your neck, and the lullaby starts again. You don't sleep that night. Not really. You doze in and out, head resting against the warm shoulder of the boulder, lulled by the occasional moss sigh and the tiny, contented snores of nearby pebbles. Every time you start to drift into a full dream, the scroll in your lap flutters. Like it's about to self-destruct. Assigned subject: the limestone formation of Keros. You're not even entirely sure where Keros is. Some unremarkable, windswept island with more goats than mortals, where the rocks are quiet and the wind has too many opinions. It's not near anything, which is kind of the point, you suspect. The next morning, or what passes for morning in this myth-soaked forest, you sit up with a groan and look around. The boulder's gone cool. Not cold, just neutral, like it's slipped back into geological objectivity. The talking pebbles are mostly gone too. A few still nap in the grass, dreaming of plate tectonics and being skipped across ponds. You leave them be. You rise, tuck the scroll under your arm, sling your lyre over your shoulder, and begin walking. The forest thins out around you, the trees giving way to scrub and pale rock. Everything gets quieter, but not in an ominous way. It's more like the world is waiting, holding its breath to see if you can actually do this. Half a day's walk and a ferry ride with a very unfriendly dog later. You arrive at Keros. It's bleak and oddly beautiful. The cliffs are pale and crumbling, sculpted by wind and time into curves and crags that resemble nothing so much as the inside of someone's elbow. The kind of place that seems allergic to grandeur. You find the formation. Without much trouble, it's not even large. Just a cluster of worn limestone blocks, stacked. Like a child gave up halfway through building a castle. You stand before it. Wait. Nothing happens. Hi, you say, feeling ridiculous. I'm here to make you cry. The limestone does not respond. Obviously. You sigh and set your things down. Might as well get comfortable. You lay a flat patch of moss over a jutting stone instant bench. Then you draw your lyre across your lap and begin tuning. Each note sounds thin at first. The wind whips them away like it doesn't want this place to get any ideas. You try again. Something softer, simpler. A shepherd's lullaby for wind-chapped rocks. A melody shaped like patience. Nothing mainstream. Fact: limestone is a sedimentary rock, formed mostly from ancient marine life. Layers of crushed shells and coral, compacted over time into something hard, porous, and oddly emotional. If you know what to listen for, you try again. This time you sing, not words, exactly, just syllables and sounds. Echoes, you match the wind's tempo. Let your voice follow the contours of the stone like a brush across a sleeping face. Still nothing. Hours pass, maybe more. The sun tilts across the sky and throws long shadows over everything. You eat a single fig. It's judgmental. And then, just as you consider giving up, the wind shifts. You stop playing because the limestone is humming very faintly, almost below. Hearing, but it's there. A bass note drawn, not from air but memory. You freeze. Not wanting to scare it off, a fringe theory from an old symposium in Athens comes to mind. Certain materials, especially porous rocks like limestone, can hold sound for centuries, slowly releasing it under the right conditions. People dismissed it as nonsense. But you're starting to believe it. You hum again. Lower this time. The limestone responds, not melodically, more like resonance. A pulse, a rhythm deep in the earth. You close your eyes and try something new. Instead of performing at the rock, you sing with it. You mimic its rhythm. You turn your lyre to match its frequency. You stop thinking like a bard and start listening like a stone. And suddenly, the lullaby shifts. It's no longer Eurydice's tune. It's not yours either. It's something older. A sound like sand swirling underwater. Like wind in a cavern mouth. Like the hush before creation decided what shape to be. The limestone shudders. One of the crags splits. Just a hairline crack, but it's enough because from that fracture, a single drop of water forms. It trembles and falls. And you've broken, still singing mortal that you are. Watch as the limestone weeps. Not dramatically, not in torrents. Just one single, unremarkable, geologically impossible tear. Hermes would call that a win. Probably would stamp something official. Maybe give you a sticker. But you don't care. Because you realize something. Right in that moment, you weren't trying to make the limestone cry. You were just trying to understand what grief sounds like when it's had too long to settle. And the lullaby. It worked. You don't cheer. You don't gasp. You don't do any of the things you thought you'd do. If you ever saw a rock cry because of your music, instead, you just sit there, very still, and feel the weight of the moment settle across your shoulders like a borrowed cloak that finally fits. The tear dries before it reaches the ground. You don't touch it. You wouldn't dare. Instead, you shift your lyre into your lap and gently, very gently, pluck a chord that sounds like the exhale. After a long-held breath. A soft closing bracket to the lullaby. The limestone doesn't move again. It doesn't need to. It's done something today that most mortals spend their lives avoiding. It felt, and then it let go. A breeze stirs the dry grass nearby somewhere. Up on the ridge, a goat bleats in the disapproving tone goats always use, as if to say, well, great. Now we're all processing our emotions. You stay for a while, just in case the formation has anything else to say. But the limestone has gone back to being quiet. Not hollow, not cold, just complete. You nod. Thank you, you whisper. Not for the tear. For the trust. By late afternoon, you're already descending the slope back toward the ferry landing. The dock attendant, possibly the same unfriendly dog from yesterday, but in a less canine form, today grunts and barely glances up as you toss a drachma into the fair bowl. The sea is calm, the waves gentle, the kind of crossing you almost forget as you're living it. On the far shore, the scroll you were given curls in the sun. You glance at it. The red ink has faded in its place. A new phrase. Task complete. Evaluation pending. Please await further emotionally inconvenient instructions. You chuckle. Because, of course, mainstream fact. Keros, while a real island in the Cyclades, has long been considered archaeologically important. Some even believe it was once a sacred site for unknown rituals, places where music, stone, and grief converged in forgotten ceremonies. You like to imagine someone stood here long ago, just like you did, singing something fragile into limestone. By nightfall, you're back in the clearing. You're clearing the ledge. The boulder waits. You don't speak. You just sit beside it again. And lay your lyre across your lap. A soft hum rolls through the stone beneath you. You take that as a welcome back. I made a rock cry, you say after a while. The boulder offers a low, thoughtful rumble. And I didn't even use my sad verse about lost fig preserves. The boulder hums again. It sounds impressed, possibly concerned. You start tuning again, more out of habit than need. Your fingers move without much direction, coaxing soft tones from the strings like they're stretching after a nap. Then, without meaning to, you begin to play again. But this time, it's not a lullaby for grief. It's a lullaby for after. The kind of song you hum when the storm has passed and you're just staring at the sky. Still soaked, but somehow relieved. You build it slowly. Layers of old melodies. Threads of the limestone song. Even a bar or two of Eurydice's whistle rhythm. And you're not alone. The pebbles return. Emerging from the grass like sleepwalkers. One of them has a daisy tucked under its chin. Another rolls to your foot and gives it a gentle nudge. Like a cat demanding acknowledgement. A squirrel climbs down a tree and freezes. Mid-scurry, just to listen. The air changes, not colder. Not warmer, just wider. You feel the sky shift. The stars start to emerge, blinking into position like sleepy chorus members waiting for their cue. And from the forest's edge, something else approaches. It's faint at first, just a flicker of silver, a thread of night stitched into the fabric of the clearing. And then she's there. Eurydice. No, not Eurydice. Just a shape, a memory, a shimmer of what your mind still holds when you say her name too softly. She stands beneath the fig tree, watching you. Not sad, not angry, just listening. You don't stop playing. You can't. This is the verse you didn't know was missing. The one that comes after the heartbreak, after the silence, after the stone. Finally speaks. Fringe theory. Some say the best songs don't end. They just become quieter, more subtle, until they fold themselves into the silence between worlds. You don't know if you believe that, but this one fades gently, not with a finish, with a whisper. When you open your eyes again, the shape, is gone. The stars are brighter, and the boulder beneath you hums like a lullaby that's finally at peace. The next morning arrives slowly, as if even the sun is too relaxed to rise on time. You wake with your cheek pressed against the side of the boulder, a small patch of moss stuck to your face, and the vague sense that you've cried in your sleep without realizing it. Not a sobbing kind of cry, more like the soft kind that slips out while you're dreaming about someone you used to miss but now only remember fondly. You sit up, stretch, and let your limbs creak like an old lyre case. The clearing is quiet again, birds have left, pebbles are dormant, and even the squirrel has presumably gone to file a report on your musical progress with some obscure woodland council. You glance down at your lyre, the strings are still taut, still in tune. That's a small miracle. Usually by now at least one has snapped in protest, or turned itself into a metaphor. Your fingers twitch over the frets, you don't play. Yet today doesn't feel like a performance day. Today feels like a listening day. You lie back against the stone and let the quiet settle around you. That's when you hear it. A new sound. It's faint, rhythmic, a sort of plunking, dragging, uneven shuffling sound, like someone trying to walk in sandals that don't fit and also possibly don't exist. You blink against the sunlight until a figure stumbles into the clearing. It's a man. But not just any man. This one is wearing a bronze helmet, 2 sizes too large, a toga that appears to be inside out, and a facial expression best described as historically confused. "Oh," he says, squinting, "you're real." You raise an eyebrow. "Unfortunately," he waves a hand. No, this is great. I've been wandering around for ages, trying to find the emotional epicenter of the grief lullaby vibrations. Everyone in the afterlife is talking about it. You blink, everyone. "Well," he says, "at least 3 ghosts and 1 slightly sentient urn fragment. But still, you've made waves." Mainstream fact, in Orphic traditions, certain rites were said to prepare the soul for a smoother journey through the afterlife. Some believed Orpheus's music echoed even in Hades, offering comfort to lost spirits, or, in your case, attracting emotionally unstable specters with questionable fashion sense. "I'm Theo," he says, sticking out his hand. "Died during a poorly timed interpretive dance." Long story. You shake his hand. It's warm. Strangely so. You try not to think about it too much. So, he continues, "I hear you've written a lullaby that made a rock cry. That true?" You shrugged. "Just 1 tear." He gasps. "Legends said it couldn't be done." Legends say a lot of things, most of them poorly edited. He plops down beside the boulder like it's an old friend. The boulder accepts him with a reluctant thrum. Theo sighs. "I miss lullabies, you know. Not just music, but those songs people sing when they're too tired to lie. That's what I miss." You glance at him. "You could just sing one." He chuckles. Dead people singing lullabies makes everyone uncomfortable. "We don't get invited back." You hesitate. Then, carefully, you begin to pluck at the strings. Just a simple pattern, gentle, open, a tune with space in it. You hum the first line and gesture toward him. He freezes. "Wait, really?" You nod. "So." He sings badly, in the way only someone completely untrained and completely honest can sing. His voice cracks. He forgets half the lines. But somehow, it's perfect. You harmonize, softly layering his faltering phrases with your own. The boulder vibrates in time. The air grows still again. Even the leaves seem to lean in to listen. Halfway through the second verse, Theo wipes his eye. Sorry, he says. Didn't mean to leak. You're allowed, you reply. It's sort of the point. He grins. I'm gonna tell the urn. Fringe theory. Some early mystery cults believed singing with the dead could realign your soul. That joint mourning, even just in music, was a kind of sacred unburdening. You're beginning to think they weren't entirely wrong. When the song ends, the silence that follows is warm, not empty, full of something unseen but deeply felt. Theo stands and dusts off his toga. Thanks for that. Seriously, I think I can rest a little better now. Glad to help, you say. Try not to haunt anyone melodramatically on the way out. No promises. He calls over his shoulder, disappearing back into the trees. You lean back against the boulder again, your lyre resting across your chest. Your fingers drift up to the strings once more, but this time, you don't play a full song, just 3 soft notes, like an ellipsis. Because maybe today isn't for performing, maybe it's just for remembering that sometimes your music can carry someone else home. The forest settles after Theo leaves, like a blanket being tugged gently back into place. Even the shadows relax, stretching out in long, yawning angles that make the trees look older, kinder. Sleep, i.e., r. You sit in the stillness, your lyre resting loosely in your lap. You hum a few phrases, not because you're composing, but because silence now feels like it should be wearing music, just a little, like a scarf. Then, with no warning at all, your lyre gives a very small twang, and one of the strings snaps. It startles a squirrel into dropping a pinecone, which rolls down the ledge and bonks gently off the boulder. The boulder, to its credit, does not retaliate. You stare down at the string. It's the middle one, the one you've used most for the lullaby's bridge. The one that's been worked nearly to death trying to carry the emotional weight of your unfinished verses. Well, you murmur, there it goes. You pull the broken thread gently from the tuning peg, winding it carefully around your finger. It's thin and slightly frayed goat gut, stretched and dried and twisted into music. Now unraveling into memory. Mainstream fact. Ancient lyres were often strung with sheep or goat gut materials that, ironically, had once been alive and full of noise. The transformation from creature to string was, to some poets, a kind of resurrection. Others just thought it sounded better than sinew. You glance at the boulder. Don't worry, I have spares. It offers a faint thrum, the auditory equivalent of a nod. But instead of replacing the string, you lie back again. Let your eyes drift closed. You hum 3 notes, softly, your version of punctuation. And then, of course, the moment someone decides you've had too much peace. The fig tree rustles behind you. You look up to find yet another unexpected visitor climbing down from the branches with the cautious precision of someone who's never trusted gravity. She's young, barely grown. Her tunic is patched, her hair messy, and her arms are full of scrolls that keep slipping from her grip every 3rd step. Hi, she says, trying to juggle an armload of parchment and also climb over a mossy root. Are you the lullaby person? You sigh, smiling despite yourself. I guess I am. Great, she pants, flopping into the grass. I'm supposed to bring you these. She hands over a stack of scrolls, some sealed, some torn, some with faint scorch marks. What are they, you ask? Requests. Requests, yeah, from people. And non-people. And occasionally, places. They want songs. You blink. I didn't sign up for a subscription service. She shrugs. You made a rock cry. That's like 10 divine points at minimum. Now everyone wants their turn. You glance at the scrolls. The top one reads, "To Orpheus, regarding the sea that forgot how to sleep." Beneath it, "To Orpheus, from a mountain that misses thunder." And another, urgent, "A dream for a god who no longer dreams." You close your eyes briefly. "Tell them I'm retired." "I could," she says. "But then I'd have to explain why you're lying here whispering lullabies to lichens instead of saving emotionally constipated islands." Fringe tidbit: in Orphic myth, some believed that the soul could become so saturated with song that it began attracting pain like gravity, drawing the woes of the world toward itself like metal to a magnet. A curse of resonance. You sit up slowly, look again at the stack of scrolls. Some are old, creased with age. Some are new, written in rushed hands and splattered ink. One even smells faintly like seawater and regret. You sigh. Let me guess. If I don't take these, someone else will. She grins. Oh no, no one else can. That's the worst answer. The answer that always pulls you back in. You strum your 5 remaining strings. The chords feel rawer now, lighter, like something's been unburdened. You turn to the girl. "Fine, but I get to nap first." She shrugs. "Suit yourself. I'll just nap louder than you." And she does. She flops onto the grass and starts snoring like someone who's been running messages through 12 dimensions with nothing but figs and sarcasm to fuel her. You glance down at the scrolls again. Lullabies. For things no one else believes need soothing. A sea that forgot sleep. A god who's forgotten how to dream. You start to understand. Maybe your job isn't just to mourn. Maybe it never was. Maybe your music was always meant to be a mirror. Something that helps even the strangest corners of the world recognize themselves again. You lean back once more. Close your eyes. Let the forest breathe around you. And, without even trying, you hum the first few notes of something new. The snoring messenger girl is still asleep when you begin tuning your lyre again. This time, without the urgency of grief or the pressure of boulder-based performance anxiety. Just simple tuning, gentle, unrushed, the kind of tuning that's part meditation, part ritual, part stalling. The scrolls lie beside you, still sealed, still expectant. You crack the first one open, carefully, like it might puff out a dramatic sigh or set itself on fire, in a fit of poetic neatness. It doesn't, but it does unfold with an unusual crispness. As if it's never been opened before, maybe because no one ever thought someone would answer it. To Orpheus, it begins, from the sea that forgot how to sleep. You tilt your head. A strange phrase, but not the strangest one you've heard this week. The message isn't long. Just a few brief lines, probably written by some priest or sailor or deeply insomniac sea deity. The waves used to dream. Now they twitch. The tide used to hum. Now it paces. The salt no longer sighs. It snaps. If you remember how to quiet the moonlight, maybe you can remind the ocean how to rest. You sit with that for a long moment. Not just the words, but the feeling behind them. Mainstream fact: ancient seafarers often personified the ocean, treating it as a living being with moods and memories. The Aegean was called wind, not just for its color, but for the sense that it was something rich, full-bodied, and occasionally drunk on its own violence. You stand. Sling your lyre across your shoulder. The messenger girl snores on unbought. The boulder hums as you walk past it, a low vibration of good luck. Or maybe just quiet relief that this song doesn't involve weeping rocks. You follow the path out of the clearing. It's easier now. As if the forest has started making space for your footsteps. By nightfall, you're standing at the edge of the sea, and oh, what a sea! It is not raging, exactly, but it's not calm either. The waves pulse like an eye, trying not to blink. They crash and recoil without rhythm, like a child pacing in a dark room. The wind smells of salt and sleepless. You sit on the shore and listen. Not to the sound of the surf, but to the absence beneath it. There's no song in the tide, no hum, no lull, just restlessness. You place your fingers on the strings, try a few notes too high, too fast. The waves recoil. You try again, lower, slower, a chord that stretches like an arm across a pillow, a note that curls like toes in warm sand. Still nothing. Fringe theory. One Orphic fragment, mostly dismissed, suggested that the ocean doesn't move because of the moon's pull, but because it's dreaming about the moon, that its tides are the tossing and turning of something trying to remember how to sleep through the centuries. So you hum. Not a melody, not yet. Just a tone. Something that could be a yawn if you squint at it sideways. The sea shifts a little. You hum again. Add a gentle phrase. A musical exhale. You imagine tucking the ocean into bed, smoothing seaweed like bedsheets, pressing a cool hand to its forehead and whispering, "She, just rest." The tide pulls back, pauses. You pluck a string, this time holding the note longer, letting it shimmer across the beach like moonlight on a still pond. And for the first time, the sea answers. A single wave rolls in, not crashing, not shouting, just curling in slow motion and sighing across your feet like it's trying to say thank you. You keep going. The lullaby grows, not louder, but deeper. Each phrase rolling into the next like breath after breath after breath. You add tiny harmonics that sparkle like stars reflected in water. You pace your song with the rhythm of a sleepy pulse, and then, finally, the sea yawns. Not in sound, but in shape. The waves soften. The pull of the tide slows. The whole shoreline breathes out, as if the ocean has finally stopped thinking about whatever's been keeping it up for the last 1,000 years. You play the last note like a whisper, and the water laps at the sand. With the gentlest of good nights. You stay until long after the moon has climbed above the horizon. No applause. No divine certification. Just a quiet, sleeping ocean, and the knowledge that, at least for tonight, the world remembers how to rest. You linger by the shore long after the sea has softened into sleep. The moon's silver light spills over the water like liquid silk, casting long, quiet shadows that seem to hum in the dark. You breathe in the salt air, thick with promise and possibility, feeling something shift deep inside your chest. An old weightlifting, replaced by a gentle calm. Your fingers trace patterns absent-mindedly on your lyre, humming low notes that mingle with the ocean's gentle sighs. It's strange how the world feels larger here and smaller all at once, as if the vastness of the sea has made space for your own smallness, and that's enough. The messenger girl, still dozing somewhere in the clearing, would probably say, "You're being poetic." You wouldn't argue. Poetry feels like a kind of magic these days, a thread weaving the world together in spite of everything. You pack your lyre slowly, each movement deliberate, mindful. The scrolls tucked beneath your arm have shifted slightly. You can almost feel their quiet urgency. Yet for now, you resist the pull. This moment is yours to savor a pause in the endless melody. As you rise, a soft breeze picks up, carrying whispers that sound like forgotten songs, barely heard beneath the rustling leaves. You smile, recognizing one of the murmurs, the voice of the forest itself, humbly thanking you for your lullabies. Mainstream fact: the ancient Greeks believed that music had the power to heal and transform not just people, but the very land itself. Orpheus was said to charm even wild beasts and stones with his songs, bridging the gap between the mortal and divine. You begin your walk back through the trees, the earth soft beneath your feet. Shadows flicker and dance in the moonlight, old friends in a world that's both familiar and forever changing. Fringe theory: some scholars debate whether Orpheus's music truly tamed the wild, or if the stories were allegories for deeper psychological journeys, songs that soothed the soul rather than the world. Perhaps both are true. You think about Eurydice and the lullabies yet unsung, the tears yet to be from stone and sea. You think about the pebbles that listen and the boulder that waits, and you wonder what other silent places might be longing for your song. As the night deepens, your breath slows, your footsteps lighten. You carry with you the quiet certainty that every note you play, every lullaby you weave, is a thread in the endless tapestry of the world. And for now, that is enough. The next morning wakes you gently, not with a blaring trumpet or a divine thunderclap, but with the soft chirping of birds and the warm glow of sunlight spilling through the canopy. You stretch, feeling the familiar ache in your fingers, a reminder that your lyre is still very much your companion in this strange journey. The stack of scrolls waits patiently beside your bed of moss, like an unopened invitation to a party you're not sure you want to attend. You pick one at random, no sense in prioritizing when all the requests feel equally urgent and equally impossible. This one reads, "To Orpheus, from the mountain that misses thunder." You smile at the image, a mountain pining for the storm, craving the violent symphony of lightning and rain, but trapped in a stubborn silence. You rise, gathering your lyre and the scroll, and head toward the foothills, where the mountain's voice might still be heard, or at least coaxed. The path winds upward, rocky and steep, with the scent of pine and damp earth filling the air. As you climb, the mountain looms larger, a silent giant draped in mist and shadow. You pause at a ledge and look out over the valley below. The sky is cloudless and still, not a single rumble of thunder daring to disturb the calm. You pluck your lyre, tuning to a deep, resonant note that echoes against the stone face. Mainstream fact: mountains were sacred in many Greek myths, often seen as homes to gods or places of divine revelation. Thunder was considered Zeus's voice, a powerful reminder of divine authority. You begin to sing not a lullaby this time, but a summons, a call for the storm to return, to shake the earth and remind the mountain of its wild heart. Your voice rises and falls like the wind, weaving through the pine needles and bouncing off jagged rocks. Suddenly, a distant rumble stirs the sky. Clouds gather, dark and rolling. Fringe theory. Some ancient thinkers believed mountains could sleep and wake like living beings, their moods reflected in the weather. Whether metaphor or myth, it's a beautiful way to think about nature's rhythms. As the first distant crack of thunder rolls through the valley, you smile. The mountain remembers. You play on, your music blending with the growing storm, an ancient duet between mortal and mountain. Silence and sound, longing and release. The storm breaks over the mountain in waves of sound and light, the sky tearing open to reveal raw, pulsing energy. You stand firm on the ledge, lyre in hand, letting the rain soak into your skin, feeling the thunder's heartbeat sync with your own. Each flash of lightning illuminates the jagged peaks. Each boom a drumbeat in your unfolding song. You don't fight the storm, you become part of it, weaving your music through the chaos, softening the wildness with gentle harmonies, coaxing the mountain's fury into something more balanced, more whole. Around you, the world responds. Trees bow, rivers swell, and the earth hums beneath your feet. You realize your lullaby has transformed it. No longer just a song of sorrow or comfort, but a celebration of nature's raw power and delicate grace. Mainstream fact: Greek myths often portrayed storms as manifestations of divine will, particularly Zeus's. Yet they also recognized the essential role of balanced storm and calm, destruction and renewal. As the rain eases, the clouds part to reveal a sky scrubbed clean and sparkling with stars. You breathe deeply, feeling the storm's energy settle into the earth, leaving behind fertile silence. The mountain seems to exhale, a low, satisfied rumble vibrating through the ground. Fringe theory. Some scholars argue that Orpheus's journey through grief and music symbolizes the human process of embracing chaos before finding peace, a metaphor played out on the landscape itself. You gather your things, the storm's freshness lingering on your skin like a blessing. The mountain's voice has returned, deeper and richer, carrying stories of thunder and rain that will echo long after you've gone. You walk down the path with a sense of quiet triumph, knowing the lullaby has done more than soothe, it has awakened. Back at the clearing, the boulder waits silently, humming softly as if eager to hear what you've learned. You settle beside it and play a few notes, a new lullaby for old friends and new beginnings. And as the night wraps around you like a velvet cloak, you feel, for the first time in a long while, truly at peace. The forest feels softer as you return to the clearing, the trees whispering gentle secrets in the moonlight. Your lyre hums quietly. In your hands, the strings still warm from the storm and mountain song. You sit beside the boulder, your longtime companion in this strange, beautiful journey, and feel the day's weight ease from your shoulders. You pull the remaining scroll from the stack, the last message waiting patiently in your lap. It reads simply, urgent, a dream for a god who no longer dreams. You breathe in deeply, feeling the urgency and the tenderness wrapped in those words. A god who has lost their dreams is a quiet kind of tragedy, one that reverberates beyond mortals and myths. You close your eyes and begin to hum, your voice soft and slow, threading a melody meant to cradle forgotten hopes. Your fingers dance lightly across the lyre strings, weaving sounds that fold around the silence like a warm blanket. Mainstream fact: ancient Greeks often believed gods required worship and remembrance to remain vibrant, without which their powers and personalities could fade like dreams at dawn. Your song doesn't rush. It lingers in the spaces between notes, a lullaby meant not to wake, but to soothe. You imagine a god drifting, floating through endless night, waiting for a single note to spark a flicker of memory. The forest listens. The boulder hums. The pebbles, still nearby, seem to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Fringe theory. Some scholars speculate that Orpheus's journey and his music was an allegory for restoring connection between humanity and the divine. A bridge built from song to reignite forgotten dreams and hopes. As you finish the lullaby, you feel a gentle warmth wash over the clearing. The shadows seem less heavy, the night less vast. You lie back against the boulder, eyes closing slowly, your breath soft and even. The journey that began with grief and a weeping rock has brought you here, to quiet, restoration, and hope wrapped in sound. And as your fingers rest lightly on your lyre, the last notes fading into the night, you feel the music settle like a gentle whisper in your soul. Word count: 1091. Wind down. As the night deepens and your eyelids grow heavy, allow yourself to drift slowly into calm. Imagine the soft rustle of leaves, the gentle pulse of distant waves, and the warm embrace of a world that holds space for every sigh and every tear. There is comfort in the silence between songs, in the spaces where music lingers just out of reach, cradling you softly as you breathe. You have traveled with stones and seas, mountains and gods, each carrying their own stories, their own lullabies. And now, as you rest, remember that every note you carry within you is part of a greater harmony. The echoes of ancient songs live in your breath, your heartbeat, the quiet moments before sleep. So let the music fade gently, like twilight folding into night. And let your dreams be as soft and kind as a lullaby whispered by the stars themselves. Sleep well, dear traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.